An award-winning film director from West London has criticised the Prime Minister's plans for the film industry to make more mainstream movies. BAFTA winner Steve McQueen claims David Cameron's ideas to generate more commercially successful films will simply stifle creativity in the London film industry. Our entertainment correspondent Lucrezia Mellerini has been to meet him as he releases his latest film.
Already award-winning and critically acclaimed, Shame, released this week, tackles both adult and challenging themes. Partially funded by the UK Film Council and the National Lottery Fund, the man who directed it says it may never have been made if new government plans on film funding go ahead.
I imagine not. But then again, as I said before, a film about a king with a stammer wouldn't get made neither.
He's talking about The King's Speech, of course, last year's huge success story, raking in over £250 million at the box office, and the film that David Cameron's using as an example of just how profitable a British-produced film can be.
With the advent of CGIs.
The Prime Minister unveiled part of his plans today at Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire. He's calling for UK lottery funding to go to films with bigger box office potential. But there are concerns of how this will work in practice and what it will mean for small-scale independent cinema.
Egg will be all over his face, because what's presumed as being a commercial success could be an absolute commercial failure. And the opposite to that, of course, a film that's deemed to be not particularly desirable or deemed to be not particularly have potential to be successful, like The King's Speech, then becomes a £104 million movie.
Today's news comes ahead of the publication of a wider review on film policy, due out next week. Part of the consultation process, the man behind Downton Abbey.
The more government money goes into films that do make money and do find favour around the world, the more money there is to spend, because that money will go back into films.
And we could be talking lots of cash. Last year, the industry contributed over £4 billion to the economy. That includes inward investment. With London an increasingly popular location for blockbuster film shoots, that means a direct benefit to the capital.
It's not just locations that London can offer. Here in Soho, the streets are teeming with post-production houses. And it's that kind of craft and skill that the government hopes will attract overseas investment.
But it is, however, unlikely that this will appease those independent movie makers who fear their films will never see the light of day. Lucrezia Mellerini, London Tonight.
Well, a little earlier I spoke to our film critic James King, and I began by asking him what he makes of David Cameron's announcement.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of when an armchair football fan says of the England team, oh, they should win more games. Well, yeah, of course they should. Of course we want more British films to be big hits, but it's not quite that easy, is it? You know, there's not a magic formula. And I think actually filmmakers hearing this so-called advice from someone who's never worked in the film industry will actually find it very patronising.
And I guess there's a real danger, isn't there, that creativity, you know, in the desire, to put it crudely, put bums on seats, creativity could really be stifled.
Yeah, exactly, and I think there's been too little emphasis placed on creativity today, and it's interesting that The King's Speech has been mentioned today a lot as a film that, you know, didn't cost very much but made a huge amount of cash. Well, that film wasn't made as a blockbuster, it wasn't planned out as a blockbuster, it was created by a brilliant director and writer and great actors, and because it was creative, it went on to really capture audiences' imaginations. Creativity is really important, it's not just about the cash.
And that being the point, very difficult to identify a film in the early creative stages that might turn out to be a blockbuster.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's a little bit of, it sounds a bit corny to say magic, but there is a little bit of luck and magic involved in the film industry. There isn't a magic formula, unless you just want to make endless Transformers films. You know, there is an element of surprise. The King's Speech was a surprise hit. Slumdog Millionaire, a surprise hit. And it's interesting that those films have been mentioned today, but, you know, no one could have predicted that they were going to be huge. You can't predict surprises. That's the very nature of them.
Stripping it right back to the beginning, where does this leave wannabe filmmakers, people who are starting out in the industry, who are trying to break into what is a very, very difficult career?
Yeah, I mean, we're not in a great time for first-time filmmakers. If I was 20 years old trying to make a movie now, it would be tough, especially as we've lost the Film Council recently. But, I mean, trying to be optimistic, I hope that old cliche comes into play, necessity is the mother of invention. You know, in tough times, sometimes artists create their best work. So, fingers crossed, that's the best we can hope for.
James speaking to me earlier on. A reminder of our top story.